Mayssa, thank you very much for coming on board. You are the Senior Investment Manager for the Pictet Nutrition Fund. And what I thought we'd do is we'd start by talking a bit about the kind of alternative end of the nutrition spectrum, and then we'll end up in the kind of mainstream end. Now, obviously, you have to invest in listed businesses, like businesses that are on a stock market. And I suppose one of the big problems is most of the alternative stuff that's out there, and I suppose we'll talk a bit about things like plant-based alternative proteins, cellular meat, they're not really listed. There's a few of them out there. So what's your take on, particularly on this kind of plant nutrient, plant-based alternatives versus cellular? There's a big debate going on. What's your view on how that's going to play out?
So I think for me, it's not so much the debate of plant-based versus cellular, which one is going to win. I think that they can both gain share at the expense of traditional proteins. I think we've seen really a surging demand for animal-based proteins throughout the years, growing population, rising middle class. And this has led to a very unsustainable form of agriculture, which we call factory farming or, intense large-scale animal husbandry, which is associated with a number of challenges. I mean, the proliferation of antimicrobial resistance in humans, which is actually one of the biggest concerns of our current healthcare systems, environmental degradation as well. I mean, 14 to 15% of greenhouse gas emissions come from livestock, and then even, the zoonotic disease. I mean, 75% of all new infectious diseases in humans have actually come from animals in the past decade. So all this to say that if we want to continue to consume as much meat or what we think is meat, we're going to have to look into alternatives. So I think there's room for both plant-based and cellular ag. Now, if I had to give my view on sort of compare the two, I would really look at a few factors. The first one would be the sensory experience, because at the end of the day, to really motivate a consumer to switch from their usual juicy, yummy burger, they're really going to have to have a similar experience. And so it's difficult for me to judge personally because I've never tasted a lab-grown piece of meat or chicken. I don't know if you have. I have tasted all the plant-based alternatives, but from what we've seen from all the reported taste tests, they're both okay. I mean, they're said to be maybe not 100% the same experience as meat, but close enough. And then down the line, when more of these cell-based products will become commercialized, some say that they'll actually be able to go one step further than plant-based in terms of flavor and nutrition and performance, and more closely resemble real meat. So time will tell if that's the case. I think the current hurdle that they're facing is it's very difficult to replicate the fat component in the taste and the texture. So it's too early to judge if that's going to be achievable, but I think from a sensory experience, we can get there. Then from a nutritional point of view, it's true that they both have the advantage of being antibiotic-free. I mean, I think I mentioned this problem with antimicrobial resistance in humans, toxin-free. I mean, I think in a lot of seafood, you see things like mercury poisoning and other parasites and toxins. You don't have the issue of spreading zoonotic disease in the farming process. And actually, I think also my understanding in the case of cell-based meat, the composition can actually be controlled. So you can actually, for instance, reduce cholesterol, fats. You can add micronutrients and vitamins. So I think from a nutritional perspective, they're both definitely there. And yeah, maybe cell-based can go one step further, but time will tell. Then it comes to affordability, because again, I think I mentioned, I think consumers really want to shift to healthier diets for people and planet. They're much more conscious of the environment. But at the end of the day, it still has to be affordable if we're going to get widespread growth in these categories. And here it's true that for the time being, plant-based is much more affordable. I mean, the inputs for plant-based alternatives are inherently, much more cost efficient. So, I mean, pea, soy, wheat protein, I mean, these are relatively inexpensive inputs and anywhere between, 5 and 15 times cheaper than actually their animal counterparts. For now, these products are still sold at a slight premium to animal-based products, but I think it's just a matter of time as they scale up and they get, more economies of scale in terms of procurement, that they'll be able to really, and I know it's an objective for many of these companies to achieve price parity. So I think that box should be ticked for plant-based proteins. When it comes to cell-based meat, we don't have a lot of data about pricing. I know that the first cultured meat burger developed by Maastricht University in 2013 was reported to have cost $280,000. So it's a little expensive for my taste. But that being said, I think we have come a long way because we do have evidence of a currently commercialized plant-based chicken, which is sold in a Singaporean restaurant, and a trio of 3 chicken dishes that is sold for I think $23. So relatively, I mean, the CEO of the company says that this is on par with premium chicken that you would find in any nice restaurant. So perhaps we have come a long way. We've come down the cost curve, and I think that it's a key milestone for this industry, and probably proof that affordability can probably be achieved, and time will tell as well.
Just on that one, it's interesting. I saw Mayssa Meat, which is, I think, the firm, the Dutch firm you were talking about, with the, I think it's also, it partly inspired the $1 Million Burger book as well, which is even more expensive. There are rumors that they've got their price point down for each burger down to $9. So actually, we are, even for a relatively innovative and experimental technology, we are closing in, certainly a lot less than $1 million.
Yeah, and imagine down the line as you scale up and you get more economies of scale and further innovation. I mean, and also attracting new entrants to the market, which will drive the competitive spirit. And I think that as you say, these are great. It's great evidence of the commercializability and affordability of this category. So I think that should be fine. Then there's obviously the regulatory aspect. I mean, plant-based products are regulated like any other non-animal based food ingredient products. So it's pretty simple. I think that maybe with cell-based, it might be a little bit more complicated. There's a little bit more of an unnaturalness factor, especially if, in some cases the cells are genetically modified. So I think also here, I think it will depend on different countries. Then again, it's true that for all the, the true meat lovers, the true carnivores, it's still a meat-based product. I mean, I think that in the United States, meat is defined as any product made from a whole or any part of a meat product. So I guess that coming from a cell, that could be considered meat. So maybe for the labeling, it might be easier for cellular agriculture. And then I think the final aspect is sort of just consumer acceptance and the yuck versus cool factor. And here, I think plant-based has become pretty mainstream now. I mean, okay, it's only I think in the US, it's only 2% penetration within the overall meat category. But then, I think people are used to plant-based dairy as well. And it's just become a little bit more mainstream. People generally understand the list of ingredients. They understand how it's made. It's not that difficult, but maybe with cellular agriculture, it's a little bit, it's grown in a petri dish in the lab. So maybe there will be a little bit more pushback there. But I think that down the line, if we really want to reduce our consumption of meat and care for the environment, care for our health, eat less meat that is full of antibiotics and other hormones and things like that, then there's definitely scope for both of these categories to grow significantly.
Just on that kind of division between cellular and plant-based alternatives. One of the arguments, and one of the investors in the field, Jim Mellon, who's involved with a firm called Agronomics, which is one of the few listed businesses, his argument is he prefers cell-based because effectively there's a lot more intellectual property in there. You can defend it, as you said, it's much more based on technology and science. You basically start with a stem cell, and then effectively you use growth factors and you use media, and then you get a bioreactor and you expand it all. So it's much closer to the biotech industry, and there's much more defendable, he thinks. Therefore, that's why he, as a venture capitalist, he much prefers that end, and is less enthusiastic about the plant-based proteins because he worries that effectively there's not so much technology involved, and you're having to spend a lot of money building effectively food brands, and food brands is an expensive business. Where do you fall in that debate?
So I think that there is some degree of truth there. Obviously, lab-grown meat, it's a lot more technical. There's a lot more, it's a lot more difficult to achieve. Obviously, I mean, just if you just think about the project at hand, so there is a bit of truth there. But I would say that there is still some IP. I mean, I don't think that with plant-based is just building a food brand. There is still quite a bit of IP, and I think that the proof of that is just that, okay, obviously there have been a lot of emerging brands in the space, but very few have really managed to succeed, get on the shelves, get into people's households. I think that, I don't know if you've tasted, I've tasted a bunch, and it's true that there are very few that really manage to mimic the taste, the mouthfeel, the sensory experience of real meat. So I think that there is still some IP. I would agree that there's perhaps less, but there is still a large degree of IP on the plant-based side as well.
I might have got to ask you, if you've tasted a few of them now, what was your favorite one personally? What do you like the most?
Question.
Looking back at this broad divide between the two areas, there's not a lot of companies listed in the market. That's the problem, though. They're mostly venture capital backed businesses. There's even talk of a kind of vegan VC mafia out there, which is not surprising, because I imagine if you're a venture capitalist and you're interested in this area, you probably like to have vegan or vegetarian tendencies. But there's not a lot of businesses out there. One of the few businesses out there is the eponymous Beyond, which is out there, Beyond Meat. I mean, what is there? I mean, what can you invest in anything in this sector? Is it all venture capital at the moment?
So actually, there are quite a few listed companies on the plant-based side, whether it's plant-based meat alternatives or dairy alternatives as well. Yeah. Some are on the smaller side, so I think it depends on the constraints of the investor. It is true that on the cell-based side, there are much fewer listed companies for the moment. I think you mentioned there's one that is listed, that is an investment company investing in sort of startups in the space. But we have seen a great number of IPOs in the space in the past few years. It's really enlarging. I think that what we're hearing, so obviously we stay connected to the private side, and what we're hearing is they would prefer to come to the listed market and remain independent when they search for capital, rather than disappear into a large group where they're going to be, just a brand amongst others, and lose really their identity. So we do expect a large number of these to come to the market going forward, and the opportunities in the listed space to grow.
And do you hear on the grapevine that should we expect anything in 2021? I've heard rumors, for instance, that Oatly's on its way.
Yeah, we hope so. I think that it will depend also. I think, COVID has also created, maybe disrupted or maybe created opportunities for some of these companies. I think it will really depend on whether, their ability to raise capital at attractive levels in the private markets. And also what we've seen as actually one of the motivating factors for these companies to come to the market is it's great advertising. I mean, I think you saw that with Beyond Meat. I think that the fact that the IPO was all over the newspapers was actually a driver as well for the sales of the company. Yeah. So I think time will tell. Yeah, I think we'll see, but we do expect the pipeline to grow.
Just again, sticking with the timescales, we've already seen, I think, Impossible cut their wholesale prices. I think literally this month in January when we're talking. So I think they've cut their wholesale prices by 15%. Do you think that? I mean, if you had to put a finger in the air, when do you think for plant-based alternatives they will cost less than meat? We're not quite there. You said quite right at the moment they're largely charging a premium. Do you think they will charge less than conventionally grown meat?
So here's the thing. So we mentioned that the inputs are, anywhere between 4 and 15 times cheaper than their animal counterparts. I think the reason why today they trade at a premium, they're priced at a premium, is because the economies of scale aren't there. The procurement scale isn't there. And these companies have all said that they are reaching for price parity. They don't want to have premium products. They really want to have products that are available to the masses, and for people to be able to switch to healthier products for people on the planet without having to, make a big dent in their wallets. So they've all said that they're aiming for price parity, and they could probably even go below. I think that we have seen some other companies, not on the meat side and even on the plant-based egg side, actually go below their animal-based counterpart. So they haven't really guided for a specific timeline, but I think that if we continue to see growth in the category, it's a bit of a virtuous cycle, because scale will drive, economies of scale will drive down cost, and we'll be able to get there pretty fast, I think.
We've already seen, as you mentioned, there's the first product in Singapore, which in the cellular meat side, which is a chicken-based product, which has come out, as you said, $23 in Singapore. When do you think? I mean, none of us know the answer to this except the company's doing it. But when do you think we're likely to see a main market cellular-based red meat, i.e., pork or beef? Would you reckon next year or two, or do you think it's probably a bit further away at scale?
To be honest, I'm not sure, because, I remember a few years, 1 or 2 years ago, people were saying, oh, this is something for 10, 15, we're not going to see anything before 10, 15 years. And surprise, surprise, in December, there's something actually like served in a restaurant. So I think, I think it could come sooner rather than later, but I wouldn't be able to pinpoint a specific date.
Let's just pull out a bit further. So there's a few listed businesses, but not many. There's, of course, a very successful, very big listed food sector in the world's main stock markets. Lots of lots of very successful Swiss companies. You're speaking from Swiss Fund Manager, are big food companies. Which of the big food companies do you think are really switched on to this area? Because obviously they could see it as a threat, but equally they could see it as something that they co-opt. Where do you feel how the big majors are positioning themselves? So let me give you an analogy. In climate change, BP and Royal Dutch Shell have jumped on the renewables bandwagon. They're doing and are making great claims that they're going to go down that path. Exxon traditionally has been a bit more aloof and has said that they're probably not as interested. How are the big food companies kind of differentiating themselves by their attitude towards this revolution?
Yeah, I think that, so we have seen a lot of the big food companies go into the plant-based side. So we've seen Nestle, they have, their own plant-based products. They're investing heavily in this area. Actually, they've been divesting a lot of their less healthy businesses to have some more R&D to go into there. And if you really think about the R&D budget of Nestle, that could potentially be quite huge. So they've moved there. Also, Danone actually has the leading plant-based dairy portfolio. So they acquired White Wave in 2017, and they're actually the leaders in plant-based dairy. So this is, and then the issue that we see with some of the pure meat companies is that it's a bit contradictory, right? So you're pushing a product that is better than traditional meat, but you're also selling traditional meat. So I think here it's a little bit more difficult, although some of them have tried. So I think that they have to move in this direction because this is the way that the world is going. It's faster growth, it's better margins, and so and this is why we pay close attention to the companies that are innovating into plant-based to make sure that they're on top of the trends.
There is we talked a lot about meat-based alternatives, protein-based alternatives. There is a wider ag tech sector, agricultural tech sector, and there's a wider food tech sector. I suppose you could argue that the likes of the Deliveroos and the Delivery Heroes are part of a food tech sector, but there's certainly a wider ag tech sector. Are there opportunities in the wider food and ag tech sector? And if so, where do you think they are? I mean, we hear lots of talk about clever GPS technology with farmers and all that kind of stuff. Farming's probably due for a data revolution. Where do you think the next interesting kind of niches in the broader ag tech market are going to be?
So if we start with ag tech, there are actually quite a few listed companies across the space. So one category that we really like is precision farming. So basically companies that allow better use of natural resources to extract higher yield with the same or fewer inputs. So as you know, we're facing a food security challenge, growing population, some 10 billion people by 2050. Which will require 50% increase in food production. But as you know, we don't have 50% more natural resources to work with. So the opportunity here is huge. And here there's quite a few listed companies. The leading company in the space is John Deere. They offer state-of-the-art technologies, things like Blue River technology, which is a see and spray technology. So basically applying water and fertilizer only where needed on the field, resulting in 80 to 90% reduction in water and fertilizer use. So this is great, and also less chemical fertilizer use means reducing nitrogen oxide, which is sent into the environment and run off into streams. So although John Deere is a leader, there are also many more precision farming companies, either on the hardware side or on the software side. So this is an area where we see a lot of abundance in the listed space. Another area that we like a lot is vertical or indoor farms, where there are now 2 listed companies and maybe more to come. So, basically vertical indoor farming is also a solution to our food security challenges with lack of arable land and natural resources, because basically food is grown indoors. In precisely controlled environments, and there are clear sustainability advantages here because there's 99% less water use, 99% less land use, no need for pesticides and chemical fertilizers. You have predictable yields, no agricultural runoff polluting the water streams. And then if we look at it from a consumer's perspective, you get tastier and fresher products all year round. You don't get shortages like you did during COVID because of disruptions in the supply chain. We also think that COVID really highlighted the drawbacks of these very complex global supply chains. So locally grown is definitely an advantage there. And also, you benefit from less, being locally grown. It also reduces the environmental burden of having to transport, fresh fruit and vegetables for hundreds of miles, and reducing the food waste that occurs. So I think when lettuce is shipped from the East Coast of the United States to the West Coast, 20% is wasted just in the transportation process. So we like this space as well. Another area that we like is land-based fish farms. So yeah, there's quite a few listed companies there. And, in the same way that we think of vertical farms as greenhouses, land-based fish farms are blue houses. So basically, fish are raised, again, in an ideal environment. The water is continuously purified, but 99% recycled. The water isn't polluted then. You're not hurting biodiversity. The fish are kept safe from sea lice and other external diseases. And because they're located close to the end consumer, you also don't have to ship by plane fish as we do today, which also reduces the carbon footprint, and you get fresher salmon. So we really like this space as well. And then finally, although maybe this is not the first thing that might come to mind when you think of agtech, but we also look at plant health technologies. So, all companies that offer alternatives to chemical pesticides, more natural solutions like microbial solutions or chelated minerals, which are key to improving soil fertility, that also there are a lot of listed options. So the agtech space is actually quite exciting in the listed space.
Just picking up on that last point, I was actually listening to a podcast by the chairman of Moderna, the vaccine company, and he was busy having a chat away. And then the interviewer said, "What do you think about plant biotech?" And he said, "Absolutely fascinating space." He said, "That's a space to watch out for." Is there anything interesting? Are there interesting companies operating in the kind of plant biotech space, effectively engineering new plants to do better stuff? Is anything on the stock markets there?
Yep. So we do have a few companies on the stock market. So I can't give you specific names, but we do have a few in the US that are listed. They're small for the moment, but depending on the liquidity constraints of the investors, they're definitely investable. And yeah, we also do think that this is a very exciting area because it's definitely needed to address our food security issues in a sustainable way.
Very last question: with many of the big investment gold rushes, where people have seen a lot of money going into a sector, there's quite often the best money's made in the picks and shovels companies, the people supplying the equipment which all these people are using. So in the cellular space, you've probably got biotech companies. I imagine in the plant-based space, you've probably got the people supplying the actual equipment that they're making, and also probably the ingredients. Are there any other kind of picks and shovels areas that investors should watch out for in this space?
So I think that I would say that we would see opportunities in both the actual finished products and also the picks and shovels or the ingredient. I think a great example is if we look at the plant-based side, because I think this is a really hot space. The ingredients manufacturers that really provide the extra emulsifiers and texturants and ingredients that help to mimic the taste and mouthfeel and the chew and the entire experience of meat. They're essentially the R&D engines of these food companies, and they really, like, in the same way that they help these companies reduce fat, reduce sugar, reduce salt content whilst preserving taste and mouthfeel. They also help these companies mimic color, taste, mouthfeel of meat without any meat. And the benefit of investing in the suppliers is actually that they have exposure to a large number of different products and brands, so potentially multiplying potential success. That said, the winners of the plant-based meat alternatives revolution, I mean, there's also a huge addressable market there, right? I mean, we talked about it. If you go from 2%, even from 2% to 10% penetration in this category, it could be huge. So we would also keep an eye on those. And I guess this is where our job is to identify the winners of this market. So that's on the plant-based side. I think on the vertical farming side, there's also all the companies which are going to be supplying the equipment for the vertical farms. For hydroponics and aeroponics, that one could look into as well. But I think that there will be winners both in the actual finished product, or the actual company, running the farms or making the plant-based alternatives, as well as the suppliers.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.